I love this movie. I was so blown away by it. We had 28 days later and 28 weeks later, and now it's time for 28 years later. We've been so excited about this movie. We have seen it. We did a quick little out of the theater reaction to it, which you guys were very excited about. Here is our non-spoiler review. What we are going to do, a separate spoiler chat next week. So hang out with us here. This is not going to spoil for you, but we can get into it, and we really need to get into it. Wednesday at noon next week. That's June 25th.
Yes.
Come hang out with us then. So until then, Alonzo, what is 28 years later about?
7, 6, 11, 5.
Once you walk onto that mainland, there's no rescues.
Moving up and down again.
So I guess it's 2030 because it's 28 years after the zombie outbreak of 2002. And we are in the Scottish Highlands in a fenced off community. Basically, they live in one of those places where there's a causeway to the mainland, but it gets covered up by the tide, so you can only get there at certain times of day. And young Alfie Williams plays Spike. And he is 12 years old, and his father, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, has decided that Spike is now old enough to go with him to the mainland where they hunt zombies, which I guess to sort of thin the herd, because you know they've done a pretty good job of keeping themselves separate from the mainland. And this movie establishes, by the way, that Europe fixed their stuff. So this is just in the UK that is still dealing with these rage zombies 28 years later. Of course, things do not go entirely as planned, and Spike comes to learn things, as one does when one is growing up, that sort of change his view of the world. So this is still a zombie horror movie with, you know, frightening stuff and gross outs and gore and, you know, blood barfing. But, you know, as I mentioned in our Out of the Theater recap, the movie of you know, Danny Boyle's that this wound up reminding me the most of was not 28 Days Later, but Millions, which is also a wonderful coming of age film about a kid coming to understand the beauty and the cruelty of the world around him. Whether or not horror fans are going to be on board for the tone of what Boyle and his co-writer Alex Garland are after here remains to be seen. But I think they have challenged themselves and us to do something far beyond what we would have expected from a sequel, even though Scuttlebutt this is sort of a launch pad for a next kind of phase of this franchise. But it's really effective as a drama and as a character piece, and also, you know, as a blood-barfing zombie movie.
I love this movie. I was so blown away by it. This is going to go on my top 10 list, I think, at the end of the year. I can very easily imagine that because of that mastery of tone that you talk about. I've seen some complaints where people think this is like a mishmash of too many movies and they don't flow into each other. And I do recognize that in other movies that try to juggle tone not quite so masterfully. But this is so seamless as it goes from like 70s folk horror to Summer That Changed Everything movie to a movie that's unexpectedly deeply poignant. And then it's funny somewhere in between too. I laughed a lot, and it felt really, really good to laugh a lot because for a long time it is just exquisitely tense. I mean, it's just that mastery of just violence and dread and mood, and like the use of the sound design. It's the sound designer from The Zone of Interest.
Yes.
Johnny Byrne, who won an Oscar for that. So there's a real like delicacy with just like the details of the sound design, the use of music, the use of the soundtrack. If you've seen the trailer for this movie, there's this poem, this Rudyard Kipling poem called Boots. Boots. Boots, and it builds to like almost this rageful shriek, and it's so suspenseful, and they use that in the film here really, really well as well to establish that sense of dread off the top. The kid is fucking amazing.
Alfie Williams is a real find. Like, he's apparently done some other stuff. He was on His Dark Materials and whatnot, but he carries this movie and does so brilliantly. And this is an extraordinary performance, and surrounded by the likes of, Jodie Comer and Ralph Fiennes, who are also, nailing it. But this kid is amazing and really, like, it is a movie about a child teetering on the precipice of manhood, and this performance allows us to see both the child and the man in this kid.
And you see who he wants to be despite what his father wants him to be, right? Aaron Taylor Johnson's character has a certain idea of like what manhood means, what responsibility means, what maturity means. And this kid, kind of not unlike Elio, which we're also going to talk about today, this kid kind of wants to be his own kid, and forge his own path, and fighting zombies allows him to do that. We talked about 28 Weeks Later earlier this week, and a lot of folks in our comments said, like, we didn't get it, or in particular, I didn't get it. It's not terrible. It is this allegory about the Iraq War. And I can see that, certainly. And what Danny Boyle and Alex Garland are doing here in the use of editing and the use of montage, particularly in the beginning where it's like got some parallel stuff going to imagery from the past. I can see what they're trying to say about kind of the inevitable perpetuity of violence. They're doing it in a way that is dazzling, and it's Hollywood, and it's like also iPhones capturing things in an intimate way. But I kind of do see what the big picture is that they're trying to talk about here within the confines of a zombie story.
Yeah. And, I think it also sort of addresses the idea of like the rights of manhood. This entire community is sort of invested in Spike having his first, travels onto the mainland and his first kills, with the zombies. And everyone turns out to congratulate him. Then they throw a big bash for them as they come back. But it's also about the sort of the intimate details of growing up and maturing and becoming a man. And I think that the film, very is making a point of kind of comparing the two of them, because in that whole Rudyard Kipling montage, they give you these like vintage shots of like Boy Scouts and soldiers and, soldiers in, I guess it's Olivier's Henry V, so this sort of tradition of like British masculinity and British, can-doism. But ultimately, I think the film kind of comes down on the side of compassion. And I think the fact that it for a series that traffics in this idea of, a mass death incident like what this, zombie outbreak has been, it kind of pauses to reflect upon that and to sort of honor, the faceless masses that were lost over the course of this thing.
Yeah. And we can get into this more too with our spoiler chat next week, but that's particularly true with like what is happening with Ralph Fiennes' character.
Yes.
In terms of like what manlyhood means. And we'll get to that. Anthony Dodd Mantle shot this.
Yes.
Who is Danny Boyle's usual cinematographer. It's got like a rich sort of texture about it, particularly when they're in the woods, when they're hunting in the woods, but then also some ethereal lighting. It is very intimate, but there's a vastness too when they're going over the causeway, which is full of promise, but also full of,
danger,
dread. Yes, nothing good's going to happen on the other side of that causeway, but it's a gorgeous sight. Yeah, and so that's very, very effective as well. And the music and the sound design and the performances and it's just great. Like, I can't wait to talk about this in a spoiler context with you because there's so much that I want to get into that works so well about this film. But a lot of folks have asked us, do you need to have seen 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later before this? You really don't.
Not really, no.
I'm glad that we saw them and talked about them, but it's not like it's a direct sequel to anything. It's more of like an extension
within the world.
of it.
Yeah.
And they do a good enough job with title cards off the top to explain, like, here's what got us here.
Yeah. You could totally go in cold and you'd be fine.
I think so too. It is very, very suspenseful. I brought Nick with me, and during the movie, his running watch alerted him, like, your heartbeat is too high. You are in a stressful situation, and that only happened once before, and that's when I took him to see Parasite in IMAX. So your watch has good taste.
This is what directors should aspire to, setting off people's Apple Watches.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, I love this. I'm going to say like a 9.8.
An 8.8. Yeah, I thought it was really powerful and definitely not what I expected. And I think a movie I'll want to go back to, more than once.
For sure. All right. So come back and hang out with us on Wednesday at noon Pacific and we'll get into it.